Alex adjusted the collar of his formal diplomatic suit, feeling out of place as he entered the grand dining hall of the alien starship Luzeren. The room was massive, its walls shimmering with colors he had never seen before, and strange orbs of light floated above the long banquet table. Around him sat dozens of alien dignitaries, their tall, slender forms covered in elaborate robes that glittered like the stars outside. It was supposed to be a diplomatic event, a gesture of peace between humanity and the Trollsorians. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The Trollsorians' sharp, angular faces gave away nothing as they conversed in their musical, untranslatable language. Occasionally, one would glance at him with what Alex could only describe as curiosity, or perhaps suspicion. As he took his seat at the far end of the table, a soft chime rang out, signaling the arrival of the evening's highlight, the main course. Alex assumed it would be some exotic alien dish, perhaps a strange fruit or a roasted animal from their home planet. He prepared himself to smile politely and eat whatever they placed in front of him. After all, maintaining good relations was his job. But when the chime stopped and the doors at the far end of the room opened, Alex's heart nearly stopped. 4 alien attendants entered, carrying a large silver tray. Resting on it, surrounded by strange glowing fruits and flowers, was a living being. She appeared to be an alien, but unlike any Alex had seen before. Her skin was a soft lavender hue, with faint silver patterns that seemed to shimmer as she moved. Her long, silken hair flowed like liquid moonlight, and her golden eyes darted nervously around the room. Her wrists and ankles were bound by delicate, glowing restraints, and her expression was one of quiet desperation. The alien guests erupted into applause as the tray was placed in the center of the table. Alex stared in disbelief, his mouth dry. This wasn't food. This was a person. The alien at the head of the table, a tall figure with elaborate horns and a deep booming voice, stood to address the room. "Esteemed guests," the alien said, his voice translated into Alex's earpiece. "Tonight, we honor our human ally with the highest Trollsorian tradition, the offering of the succulent." Alex's heart raced. He glanced at the girl on the tray, who was now staring directly at him. Her eyes seemed to plead for help, though she said nothing. The leader continued, "As the guest of honor, you, human, will decide her fate. You may choose to partake of the succulent offering, or you may forfeit the honor." Alex froze. Partake? Did they really expect him to eat her? He felt sick. The other guests were watching him intently, their expressions unreadable. Was this some kind of test? If he refused, would he insult them? If he accepted? No, that was unthinkable. Clearing his throat, Alex forced himself to speak. "This tradition is fascinating," he said carefully, choosing his words with precision. "But I must admit, it's not something humans are familiar with." The leader's horns tilted slightly, as if he were amused. "Ah, but that is why you are here, to learn and to embrace new customs. It is a great honor to partake in the succulent offering. Refusing would be disappointing." The room fell silent. All eyes were on Alex. He felt like he was under a microscope, his every move scrutinized. His mind raced for a way out, a way to refuse without offending them. The girl on the tray shifted slightly, drawing his attention. Her golden eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a brief moment, Alex thought he saw her lips move, forming a single word: "Please." He clenched his fists under the table. He couldn't do it. No matter what the consequences, he couldn't allow this to happen. But how could he refuse in a way that wouldn't jeopardize humanity's relationship with the Trollsorians? Drawing a deep breath, Alex stood, his heart pounding. "Chief Vorthak," he began, addressing the leader. "Humanity has always valued life above all else. To us, life is sacred, and we believe in preserving it whenever possible." Vorthak's eyes narrowed slightly, and a murmur spread through the room. Alex pressed on. "I cannot partake of this offering, not because I do not respect your traditions, but because it is against the core of what it means to be human. I hope you can understand." The silence was deafening. Vorthak stared at Alex for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to Alex's surprise, a small smile spread across the alien leader's face. "Fascinating," Vorthak said at last. "The human has made his choice." The tension in the room eased slightly, though Alex couldn't tell if the other guests were impressed or offended. As he sat back down, the girl on the tray looked at him again, and this time, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. But Alex knew this was far from over. Whatever game the Trollsorians were playing, he had just made himself a central piece on their board. A question of culture. Alex's heart was still pounding from the decision he had just made. The alien girl's silent plea echoed in his mind, her golden eyes filled with unspoken desperation. Around him, the atmosphere in the grand hall shifted. Whispers flowed through the room like an undercurrent, the alien guests exchanging glances and murmuring in their own tongue. Some appeared intrigued, others offended. Alex sat stiffly in his chair, the weight of his choice pressing heavily on his shoulders. Chief Vorthak's piercing gaze bore into Alex, but the alien leader's expression was unreadable. Slowly, Vorthak rose from his seat, his towering figure casting a long shadow across the table. The murmurs ceased instantly, and a hush fell over the room. "You have chosen not to partake of the succulent offering," Vorthak said, his voice echoing with authority. The words, translated into Alex's earpiece, carried a tone that was neither accusatory nor approving. Such a response is unprecedented. Alex swallowed hard, his palms sweating. "It was not an easy decision, Chief Vorthak," he said carefully, keeping his tone respectful. "But humanity has its own traditions and beliefs. To us, the preservation of life is paramount. I could not act otherwise without betraying who we are." The room remained silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a blade. Vorthak tilted his head slightly, his horns glinting under the floating lights. Then, unexpectedly, a deep, resonant laugh escaped his lips. "Fascinating," Vorthak declared, his voice booming with sudden amusement. "The human speaks of life as sacred, yet sits among beings who have conquered death itself. Tell me, Alex of Earth, do you truly believe your actions tonight will make a difference?" The question caught Alex off guard. He hesitated, feeling the weight of the alien leader's words. Conquered death itself. What did that mean? "I believe every life matters," Alex replied, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling in his mind. "Even one act of mercy can ripple outward, changing more than we can imagine." Vorthak's sharp eyes studied him intently, as if trying to peer into his very soul. Finally, the alien leader gestured to the attendants, who stepped forward and began untying the girl from the tray. She winced as the glowing restraints were removed, but her golden eyes remained fixed on Alex. She looked fragile yet unbroken, her resolve shining through despite her ordeal. "She is yours now," Vorthak said, a sly smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "As per our tradition, you have claimed her by refusing to partake. What you do with her is your responsibility." Alex blinked, stunned. "Wait, what? I didn't." Vorthak raised a hand to silence him. "Do not misunderstand. This is not a gift, but a test. You have placed yourself on a path that many have failed to navigate. Protect her, and you will prove your worth. Fail, and her fate will haunt you for the rest of your days." The cryptic warning sent a chill down Alex's spine. Before he could respond, the attendants helped the girl to her feet and gently guided her to stand beside him. She was taller than he'd realized, her silken hair brushing against his shoulder as she stood close. Her expression was a mixture of gratitude and fear. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft yet firm. It was the first time she had spoken, and her words were laced with an accent that Alex found both alien and oddly melodic. Alex glanced at her, unsure how to respond. "I couldn't just," he began, but she shook her head, cutting him off. "They would have killed me," she said bluntly. "And you would have been applauded for it. Your choice was brave, but it has consequences." Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Alex could feel the eyes of the alien guests still watching him, their curiosity mingled with judgment. He knew he had stepped into something far more complex than he'd anticipated. "Let's get out of here," Alex muttered under his breath, his instincts screaming at him to leave the banquet hall. But as he moved to stand, Vorthak's voice stopped him. "One more thing," the alien leader said, his tone turning cold. "By sparing her, you have aligned yourself with her destiny. I hope you are prepared for the burden you now carry." The words sent a shiver through Alex. What destiny? What burden? But before he could ask, Vorthak dismissed him with a wave of his hand. The other guests began to rise, their conversations resuming as if the strange event had been nothing more than a minor detour in their evening. Alex led the girl out of the hall, his mind racing. He didn't know what he had gotten himself into, but one thing was clear. This was no ordinary diplomatic mission. As the doors closed behind them, the girl turned to him, her golden eyes burning with intensity. "You've just made enemies far more dangerous than you can imagine," she said. "But if you're willing to fight, I'll tell you everything." Alex took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "Let's hear it." The path ahead was uncertain, but Alex knew one thing for sure. He couldn't back out now. Breaking protocol. The corridors of the starship Luzeren were eerily quiet, illuminated by a soft, pulsing glow that came from the walls themselves. Alex walked briskly, his new companion, Zira, at his side. Her steps were light and deliberate, her movements almost feline. But Alex could sense the tension in her every motion. "You need to explain what's going on," Alex said, his voice low but firm. He glanced behind them, half expecting alien guards to appear out of nowhere. What did Vorthak mean about destiny and burden? Why were you even there, tied up like that? Zira didn't answer immediately. Her golden eyes flicked around the hallway, scanning for any sign of danger. Finally, she stopped and turned to face him. "You don't understand the gravity of what you've done," she said, her voice sharp but not unkind. "By refusing to partake in their ritual, you've publicly defied Vorthak. That alone would have been dangerous. But by claiming me, you've stepped into a war you didn't know existed." Alex frowned. "A war? What kind of war?" Zira hesitated, as if weighing how much she could trust him. Vorthak's council isn't just a group of diplomats. They're a ruling faction, one that maintains control through fear and ritual. The offering of the succulent isn't about food. It's about power. Every guest who partakes demonstrates their loyalty to the council. By refusing, you've shown them that humanity cannot be controlled. Alex ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling up. "I didn't refuse to start a rebellion. I refused because it was the right thing to do. I couldn't just." He stopped, his voice trailing off as he caught Zira's intense gaze. "Exactly," she said softly. "And that's why they fear you now. You've proven that you're unpredictable, that you won't blindly follow their rules. That makes you dangerous." Alex sighed, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "So what happens now?" "They seemed content to let us walk out of there." "They're watching," Zira said. "Every move you make from now on will be scrutinized. They'll test you, push you, waiting for you to slip up. And if you do, they'll make an example of both of us." A low hum began to resonate through the corridor, and Zira's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "We need to move," she said urgently. "They're activating the sentinels." "The sentinels?" Alex asked, his stomach sinking. "Automated guards," Zira explained as she started walking faster, motioning for him to follow. "They're relentless, programmed to eliminate threats without question. And thanks to you, we're now considered threats." Alex's legs moved before his brain fully processed what she'd said. The two of them hurried down the corridor, the hum growing louder with each passing second. Alex's mind raced. He had expected this diplomatic mission to be challenging, but nothing could have prepared him for this. "Why were you on that tray in the first place?" Alex asked as they rounded a corner. "You don't seem like someone who'd go quietly." Zira's jaw tightened. "I was betrayed," she admitted. "I used to be a warrior, a protector of my people. But when I refused to follow Vorthak's orders, he branded me a traitor. The offering was meant to be my punishment. They thought it would humiliate me, break my spirit. Instead, you saved me." Alex snorted. "I'm not sure how much saving I've done. We're running for our lives, in case you hadn't noticed." Zira allowed a small smile to tug at her lips. "Trust me, you've done more than you realize." The corridor suddenly split into two paths, and Zira hesitated for the first time. She glanced down each path, her sharp eyes scanning for clues. The hum had grown into a steady, ominous vibration that seemed to come from all directions. "Which way?" Alex asked, his voice edged with panic. Zira closed her eyes for a moment, then pointed to the left. "This way, the engineering sector. If we can disable the Sentinel grid, we'll have a chance to escape." Alex nodded, trusting her instincts. They sprinted down the left corridor, the glowing walls pulsing in time with the vibrations. As they ran, Alex couldn't help but marvel at Zira's composure. Despite everything she'd endured, she moved with purpose, her every action calculated and precise. The hum abruptly stopped, replaced by the sound of heavy metallic footsteps. Alex's heart leaped into his throat as three towering robotic sentinels emerged from the shadows ahead. Their sleek, silver bodies gleamed under the corridor's light, and their glowing red eyes locked onto Alex and Zira. "Run!" Zira shouted, shoving Alex to the side just as the sentinels raised their weapons. A burst of energy shot past him, striking the wall and leaving a smoking crater. Alex didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted after Zira, the sentinels hot on their heels. "This way," Zira called, leading him through a narrow side passage. The walls closed in, and Alex's shoulders brushed against the sides as he ran. The sentinels' footsteps echoed behind them, growing louder with every step. Finally, they burst into a large, dimly lit chamber filled with strange machinery. Zira darted to a control panel and began frantically pressing buttons, her fingers flying over the alien symbols. "Can you even read that?" Alex asked, his breath coming in gasps. "Barely," Zira admitted, "but I know enough to override the grid." The sentinels entered the chamber, their weapons glowing ominously. Alex grabbed a metal rod lying nearby, gripping it tightly despite knowing it would be useless against the machines. "Hurry," he urged, positioning himself between Zira and the advancing sentinels. With a final flourish, Zira slammed her hand against the control panel. The room shuddered as the machinery roared to life, and the sentinels froze mid-step. Their glowing eyes dimmed, and they collapsed to the floor with a resounding crash. Alex turned to Zira, his chest heaving. "What just happened?" "I disabled the grid," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. "For now, we're safe, but we need to keep moving. This is just the beginning." Alex nodded, his grip on the metal rod loosening. As they exited the chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just become infinitely more complicated and far more dangerous. Zira's secret. The engineering sector was quieter now, the hum of the disabled sentinel grid fading into the background. Alex and Zira moved cautiously through the maze of pipes and machinery, their footsteps echoing softly in the dimly lit corridors. Alex could feel the tension radiating off Zira as she glanced around, her sharp eyes scanning every shadow for potential threats. "We need to find a safe place to talk," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "There's a lot you need to know, and I can't keep fighting alongside someone who's in the dark." Alex nodded, though unease gnawed at him. Zira's intensity was palpable, and it was clear that whatever she was about to reveal would change things. "All right," he said. "Lead the way." Zira guided him to a small maintenance alcove, hidden behind a wall of thick, tangled pipes. The space was cramped, but it offered cover and, more importantly, a brief moment of reprieve. She gestured for Alex to sit on a low metal crate while she crouched nearby, her golden eyes piercing him with a mixture of caution and determination. "Start talking," Alex said, leaning forward. "Why did Vorthek call you a burden? And what did he mean when he said I'd align myself with your destiny?" Zira took a deep breath, her expression hardening. "Because you have," she said. "By saving me, you've tied yourself to a conflict that's been brewing for generations." She paused, as if struggling to find the right words. "I told you I was a warrior, but that's not the whole story. Was the heir to a powerful clan on my homeworld. My people, the Trollzorians, are divided into factions, each ruled by an ancient bloodline. My clan, the Zirians, was one of the most influential, until we defied Vorthek." Alex frowned. "Defied him how?" Zira's gaze dropped to the floor. "We refuse to support his rise to power. Vorthek isn't just the leader of the council. He's a tyrant. He consolidates control by subjugating weaker clans and using fear to maintain loyalty. My family refused to bow to him, and for that, we were branded traitors." Her voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on. "One by one, my family members were captured or killed. I was the last. They staged my downfall carefully, turning me into a symbol of their power. By offering me as a succulent, they hoped to humiliate the Zirian name forever. But your decision to spare me disrupted their plans." Alex's jaw tightened as her words sank in. "So, by saving you, I've made myself an enemy of Vorthek and his council." Zira nodded. "Exactly. And now you're a threat to their authority, just like I am." Alex leaned back against the wall, his mind racing. This wasn't just about saving one life. It was about challenging an entire system of oppression. He felt a surge of anger at Vorthek, at the Trollzorian Council, and at the impossible situation he now found himself in. "But why didn't they just kill you outright?" Alex asked. "Why go through all this ceremony?" Zira hesitated, her expression guarded. "Because of the prophecy," she said finally. Alex raised an eyebrow. "Prophecy?" Zira sighed, running a hand through her silken hair. "An old legend, passed down among the clans. It speaks of a defender of the worthy, someone who will rise from outside the Trollzorian bloodlines to unite the clans and overthrow the tyrant. The council dismisses it as superstition, but Vorthek, he's obsessed with it. He sees it as a threat to his rule." She looked directly at Alex, her gaze unwavering. "By sparing me, you've fulfilled the first part of the prophecy. Whether you meant to or not, you've put yourself in the role of the defender." Alex stared at her, stunned. "That's ridiculous. I'm just a diplomat. I'm not here to lead a rebellion or fulfill some ancient prophecy." "Maybe not," Zira said, "but that doesn't matter. Vorthek believes it, and now he'll do everything in his power to destroy you." The weight of her words settled heavily on Alex. He had come to the Luzeran to negotiate peace, not to become the center of a political revolution. But as he looked at Zira, he realized he couldn't turn back. The choice he'd made in the banquet hall had set events in motion that couldn't be undone. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Zira smiled faintly, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "We fight," she said simply. "Together." Alex nodded, a sense of resolve hardening within him. He didn't fully understand the prophecy, nor did he care much about it. What mattered was standing against the injustice he had seen, and protecting the woman who had risked everything to survive. Before they could say more, the sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the corridor outside. Zira's expression shifted instantly, her warrior instincts kicking in. "They've found us," she said, her voice low. "We need to move. Now." Alex stood, gripping a nearby metal rod for protection. "Lead the way," he said, his determination growing with every passing second. As they slipped out of the alcove, and back into the labyrinthine corridors of the Luzeren, Alex felt the weight of their situation fully settle on him. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a battle for survival. And though the odds were stacked against them, he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't back down. The chase begins. The distant sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors, growing louder with each passing moment. Alex and Zira quickened their pace, weaving through the labyrinth of the alien starship Luzeren. The pulsing glow of the walls cast eerie shadows, making the passageways feel alive, as though the ship itself was watching their every move. "They're sending the enforcers," Zira muttered, her tone grim. "They won't stop until we're either captured or dead." Alex tightened his grip on the metal rod he had picked up earlier. "Great. Any idea how we're supposed to outrun or outfight them?" Zira shot him a glance, her golden eyes flashing with determination. "We don't. Not in a straight fight. But I know this ship's layout better than most. If we can reach the docking bay, we might have a chance to escape." "Might," Alex repeated, his voice tinged with both skepticism and fear. Zira smirked faintly, even as her focus remained on their path ahead. Escape plans aren't exactly foolproof when you're running from an army. They turned a corner, only to skid to a halt as 3 enforcers emerged from the opposite end of the corridor. The enforcers were massive, their sleek, armored forms towering over Alex and Zira. Their glowing red visors locked onto the pair, and one of them raised an energy weapon, its barrel humming ominously. "Move," Zira shouted, grabbing Alex's arm and pulling him down a side passage, just as a burst of energy seared past them. The heat singed the air, and Alex felt his heart slam against his ribcage. "They don't mess around," Alex yelled, his legs pumping as he followed Zira. "Welcome to the real Trollzorian Council," Zira replied, her voice sharp with adrenaline. The corridor narrowed, forcing them to run single file. Zira led the way, her movements fluid and precise, while Alex struggled to keep up. He wasn't unfit, but the combination of fear and the ship's unfamiliar gravity was taking its toll. Sweat dripped down his face, and his breaths came in ragged gasps. "What happens if we can't reach the docking bay?" Alex managed to ask between breaths. Zira didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stopped abruptly at a junction, glancing down both corridors. The distant footsteps of the enforcers reverberated behind them, growing louder. "This way," she said, turning left. Alex followed without question, his trust in her instincts solidifying with every second. They entered a larger chamber, its high ceiling supported by intricate metal beams. Machinery hummed and clanked in the background, and the air smelled faintly of oil and ozone. Zira led Alex to a console embedded in the wall, and began pressing buttons with practiced speed. "What are you doing?" Alex asked, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Creating a distraction," Zira replied. "If I can overload the auxiliary systems, it'll buy us some time." A loud hiss erupted from the walls as steam vents released bursts of pressurized air. Lights flickered, and the hum of the machinery intensified, growing into a low, rumbling vibration. Zira stepped back, her expression satisfied. "That showed," she started to say, but her words were cut off by the sound of approaching footsteps. Alex turned to see 2 enforcers entering the chamber, their weapons raised. He acted on instinct, gripping the metal rod tightly and stepping in front of Zira. "Get down," he shouted as the enforcers opened fire. Energy bolts streaked across the chamber, narrowly missing him. Alex ducked behind a nearby crate, his heart pounding in his chest. Zira didn't hesitate. She lunged toward one of the enforcers with a speed that Alex could barely comprehend. Grabbing a loose pipe from the ground, she struck the enforcer's weapon, sending it clattering to the floor. The second enforcer turned its weapon on her, but Alex reacted first. He hurled his metal rod with all his strength, striking the enforcer's arm and disrupting its aim. "Nice throw," Zira called, ducking behind another crate as the enforcers regrouped. I played baseball in college, Alex muttered, though he doubted it mattered now. The enforcers advanced, their visors glowing menacingly. Alex and Zira exchanged a glance, silently agreeing on their next move. Together, they darted toward the far side of the chamber, using the crates as cover. "This isn't sustainable," Alex said, his voice trained. "We need to get out of here." "Almost there," Zira replied, pointing toward a service hatch on the opposite wall. "That leads to a maintenance tunnel. It'll take us to the docking bay." The enforcers fired again, their energy bolts scorching the air. Alex and Zira sprinted for the hatch, their movements perfectly synchronized despite the chaos around them. Zira reached the hatch first, yanking it open and motioning for Alex to go through. "Hurry," she urged. Alex scrambled inside, the narrow tunnel barely wide enough for him to crawl. Zira followed, slamming the hatch shut behind her. The sound of energy bolts striking the metal echoed through the tunnel. But for now, they were safe. The two of them paused to catch their breath, their bodies pressed against the cool metal walls of the tunnel. Alex looked at Zira, his chest heaving. "Is this what your life is like all the time?" Zira gave him a wry smile. "Pretty much." Alex shook his head, a small laugh escaping him despite the situation. "Remind me never to complain about diplomatic paperwork again." Zira chuckled softly, but her expression quickly turned serious. "We're not out of this yet. The docking bay is close, but it'll be heavily guarded. Are you ready for what's next?" Alex nodded, his resolve solidifying. "Let's finish this." Zira's smile returned, this time filled with genuine admiration. "Good. Let's move." With renewed determination, they began crawling through the tunnel, the sound of enforcers fading behind them. The chase was far from over, but Alex knew one thing for certain. He wasn't running anymore. Together, he and Zira would face whatever came next, no matter the cost. The unexpected ally. The maintenance tunnel led Alex and Zira to a dimly lit corridor just outside the docking bay. The hum of the ship's systems was louder here, accompanied by the distant sounds of alien voices and the occasional metallic clank of boots on metal floors. Alex pressed his back against the wall, glancing nervously at Zira, who was peeking around the corner. "They've stationed guards at every entrance," she whispered, her golden eyes narrowing. "Standard formation. 2 at the main door, another patrolling nearby. The docking bay is the most secure part of the ship." Alex sighed, gripping his metal rod tighter. "Great. So what's the plan? We can't just walk in." Zira tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "We don't have to. There's a secondary access point through the engineering sector. It's usually locked, but if we can find someone who has clearance." Her words were cut off by a loud crash from deeper within the corridor. Both Alex and Zira froze, their eyes darting toward the sound. A moment later, an alien figure stumbled into view, clutching a smoking piece of machinery. The figure was short and stocky, with 4 arms and a face that looked permanently grumpy. Their uniform marked them as an engineer. "What the—" Alex started, but Zira raised a hand to silence him. The alien engineer noticed them and froze, their large, bulbous eyes widening. "You," they hissed, their voice low and gravelly. "What are you doing here? You're the human everyone's talking about." Alex raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Look, we're not here to cause trouble. We just need to get to the docking bay." The engineer snorted, clearly unimpressed. "To escape, I'm guessing. Do you have any idea what happens to people who defy Vorthak? Because I do. It's messy, and I don't want to be part of it." Zira stepped forward, her tone firm but calm. "We don't have a choice. Vorthak wants us dead, and the longer we stay here, the more dangerous it gets, for everyone. But if you help us, we can end this. You don't have to live under his rule anymore." The engineer hesitated, their gaze flicking between Zira and Alex. "You really think you can take down Vorthak?" they asked, their tone laced with skepticism. Zira nodded. Not alone. But with allies like you, yes. The Council's power isn't as unshakable as they want you to believe. The engineer sighed, muttering something under their breath in a language Alex didn't understand. Finally, they waved a hand dismissively. Fine. But if this backfires, I'm going to regret it. Alex exchanged a relieved glance with Zira. Thank you, he said sincerely. What's your name? Trorax, the engineer grumbled. And don't thank me yet. I haven't decided if I like you. Trorax led them to a side passage that branched off from the main corridor. It was narrow and filled with pipes and wires, the air thick with the scent of oil and burnt metal. As they walked, Trorax explained the layout of the docking bay. There's a secondary access panel on the east side, Trorax said. It's locked down with a level 3 security code. Lucky for you, I happen to have it. Zira raised an eyebrow. And why do you have level 3 clearance? Trorax smirked. Let's just say I'm good at making myself useful. Vorthek likes to keep his enemies close, but he also relies on people like me to keep his fancy ship running. They reached the panel, and Trorax quickly began working on it, their 4 hands moving with practiced efficiency. Alex kept watch, his grip on the metal rod tightening every time he heard a distant noise. Zira stood beside him, her posture tense but confident. Almost there, Trorax muttered. Just don't let anyone sneak up on us, okay? Alex nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The thought of being caught now, so close to their goal, was almost unbearable. Finally, with a soft beep, the panel unlocked. Trorax stepped back, looking both proud and exasperated. There, the door's open. You've got about 5 minutes before the system resets and locks you out again. 5 minutes is all we need, Zira said, her voice steady. She glanced at Alex. Ready? Alex took a deep breath, nodding. Ready. The door slid open, revealing the bustling docking bay. Ships of various shapes and sizes were stationed inside, and the area was filled with Trolzorian guards and workers. The sight was overwhelming, but Alex forced himself to focus. Somewhere in this chaos was their escape. Stick to the shadows, Zira whispered, leading the way. And keep your eyes open. We can't afford any mistakes. As they moved through the docking bay, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, and his instincts screamed that something was wrong. Do you feel that? He whispered to Zira. She nodded, her golden eyes scanning the area. We're not alone. Stay close. Before Alex could respond, a loud voice rang out. Stop them. The entire docking bay seemed to freeze for a moment before erupting into chaos. Guards shouted orders, and alarms blared, the sound echoing off the metal walls. Alex's stomach dropped as he realized they had been discovered. Run, Zira shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the nearest ship. Trorax followed close behind, their 4 arms flailing as they tried to keep up. The trio sprinted through the chaos, dodging guards and weaving between crates and equipment. Energy bolts zipped past them, the heat scorching the air. Alex's lungs burned, but he pushed himself to keep going. They reached a small transport ship, its hatch already open. Zira leaped inside, followed by Alex and Trorax. As soon as they were on board, Zira slammed the hatch shut and ran to the cockpit. Strap in, she shouted over her shoulder. This is going to be rough. Alex barely had time to buckle his seatbelt before the ship roared to life. The engines hummed, and the ship lifted off the ground, its thrusters blazing. Guards fired at them from below, but the transport's shields held. As they shot out of the docking bay and into the vast expanse of space, Alex finally allowed himself to exhale. They had made it. For now. But as he looked at Zira and Trorax, he knew their journey was far from over. The fight against Vorthek was just beginning, and Alex was determined to see it through. The epic reaction. The transport ship jolted violently as it exited the starship Luzaren's gravitational field. Alarms blared in the cockpit, warning of a pursuing fleet. Alex gripped the armrests of his seat, his knuckles white. Beside him, Zira worked furiously at the controls, her golden eyes locked on the holographic display in front of her. "We've got 2 patrol ships on our tail," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "They're faster than us, and their weapons will tear through our shields if they catch up." Alex glanced at the rear display, which showed 2 sleek, predatory ships closing the distance. "Fantastic. Do we have any weapons on this thing?" Zira snorted. "This is a transport ship, not a fighter. The best we can do is run and hope they don't vaporize us." From the back of the cockpit, Trorax chimed in. "You're forgetting about the cargo. Some of these transports are rigged with accidental surprises. Just in case, I might be able to rig something explosive." Alex turned to Trorax, hope flickering in his chest. "Do it. Whatever it takes to slow them down." Trorax grinned, their 4 hands already pulling open a maintenance panel. "On it. Just keep us alive long enough to make it worth the effort." The ship jolted again as another blast from the pursuing ships grazed their shields. Zira growled under her breath, her fingers flying over the controls. "Hold tight. I'm taking us into the asteroid field." "An asteroid field?" Alex asked, his voice rising in panic. "Isn't that, I don't know, suicidal?" "Only if you don't trust the pilot," Zira shot back, flashing him a confident smirk. "Do you trust me, Alex?" Alex hesitated for only a second before nodding. "With my life." Zira's smirk widened. "Good answer." The ship veered sharply, plunging into the dense asteroid field. Massive rocks tumbled through the void, illuminated by the glow of distant stars. The transport weaved through the chaos with a grace Alex wouldn't have thought possible, Zira's reflexes keeping them just ahead of certain destruction. Behind them, the pursuing ships hesitated at the edge of the field. But their hesitation was brief. The patrol ships entered the field, their superior maneuverability allowing them to close the gap. "They're still on us," Alex shouted, gripping the seat as the ship dodged another asteroid. "I'm working on it," Trorax yelled from the back. "Just need a few more seconds." "Zira, we're running out of time," Alex warned as a blast rocked the ship, causing sparks to erupt from one of the consoles. "Almost there," Zira muttered. "Just hold." "Done," Trorax interrupted, their voice triumphant. "Launching the cargo now." A mechanical clang echoed through the ship as a crate shot out of the rear cargo bay. The crate drifted for a moment before exploding in a burst of bright, searing light. The pursuing ships swerved, one of them colliding with an asteroid in its attempt to avoid the blast. The other patrol ship managed to stay on course, but the explosion had bought them precious seconds. "Nice work, Trorax," Alex shouted, relief flooding his voice. "Don't thank me yet," Trorax replied, grinning. "I rigged the rest of the cargo to go off in sequence. Let's see how they like a game of dodge the fireworks." As the transport darted through the asteroid field, more crates ejected from the cargo bay, each one detonating in brilliant flashes of light and debris. The remaining patrol ship struggled to navigate the chaos, its sleek frame grazing an asteroid before another explosion forced it to retreat. "They're falling back," Zira exclaimed, her voice tinged with both relief and victory. The transport cleared the asteroid field, its path finally open to the vast expanse of space. Alex let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his muscles relaxing for the first time in what felt like hours. "We did it," he said, his voice quiet but filled with awe. "We actually did it." Zira turned to him, her golden eyes softening. "This was just the beginning, Alex. Vorthak won't stop hunting us. But for now, we've won." Trorax emerged from the back, wiping their hands on a greasy cloth. "You two are crazy, you know that. But I've got to admit, it's been a while since I've had this much fun." Alex chuckled, shaking his head. "Glad we could entertain you." The three of them shared a rare moment of levity, the tension of the chase momentarily forgotten. But as Alex looked out at the endless stars beyond the cockpit window, he knew their fight was far from over. "What's our next move?" he asked, turning to Zira. Her expression grew serious, a fire burning in her eyes. "We find allies. Vorthek's power isn't as absolute as he thinks, and there are others who oppose him. If we can unite them, we stand a chance." Alex nodded, his resolve hardening. "Then let's get started." As the ship drifted into the unknown, Alex felt a strange sense of purpose. He hadn't asked for this fight, but now that he was in it, he wouldn't back down. Together, he, Zira, and Trorax would face whatever challenges lay ahead. And somewhere in the depths of space, Vorthek would learn that humanity was far more resilient and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined.